During the seventh lunar month of the Chinese year, the gates of the underworld are opened, and the ghosts of the ancestors are let out to visit their living relatives and to seek revenge on those who have wronged them in life. This begins in August and usually ends in September. It's a time for the living to offer food to the dead, to burn joss sticks in their honor, and to provide them with entertainment, including street corner puppet shows and operas. It's also a time for the living to be cautious so as not to offend the dead. These lost souls are hungry, and their appetites must be whetted with diligence and caution. Young children are not let out of the house without adult supervision during this time. Their parents fear that the ghosts will lure them to the underworld. There are other precautions as well. For example, it's considered bad luck for the living to either marry or move while the ghosts are about. People also avoid the beaches for fear of drowning. Indeed, everyone must exercise caution when the ghosts come to visit. The Hungry Ghost Festival is observed by Chinese Buddhists and Taoists, primarily in Hong Kong, Singapore, and Malaysia. The Chinese believe that by appeasing the spirits of their dead ancestors, they will bring good luck and fortune to their own lives. The Hungry Ghost Festival is related to the Buddhist Deliverance Festival and the Taoist Ghost Festival known as Changyan. All of these traditions honor the spirits of the dead. Thus, the seventh lunar month has come to be known as Ghost Month. On Penang Island, the Hungry Ghost Festival is known there as Phor Thor and is observed with ceremonies held in homes, temples, associations, and guilds. The festival is observed throughout the seventh month, but festivities are especially marked on the 14th and 15th days. Throughout the month, prayers are offered to the spirits of the dead, and offerings of food such as chicken, vegetables, fruits, bean curd, and white rice are placed at street corners and roadsides to appease the spirits. This is done in order to prevent the wandering spirits from entering homes and causing disturbances in the households. Offerings are also made by burning fake money, known as hell money, and some people even burn paper houses, cars, radios, and television sets for the sake of their dead relatives. The Chinese feel that these offerings reach the ghost and help them live more comfortably in the underworld. I once visited Penang while traveling through Southeast Asia. While there, I encountered what I can only imagine were legions of hungry ghosts recently set free from the underworld. For me, it was quite an interesting experience. But let me tell you a cautionary tale. Years ago, I traveled to Australia in order to attend the first Aura Congress in Darwin, in the far top end of the country. This was the first International Rock Art Congress of its kind. It was held in Darwin at the same time that the International Hunter and Gatherer Conference was being held there. So I was able to attend both of these meetings. Afterwards, I flew from Darwin to Singapore, and from there I began my journey north along the Malay Peninsula, bound from Chiang Mai in northern Thailand. Along the way, I visited the City of Georgetown on Penang Island in northwestern Malaysia. I arrived at Penang near the conclusion of the month-long Hungry Ghost Festival. At the time, I had absolutely no idea of the festival's existence or of its meaning. After a long day's travel, I arrived in Georgetown, checked into my hotel room, and went immediately to bed. My room was on the 7th floor of a high-rise hotel, and it had a commanding view of the city. That night, I drifted off to sleep, hypnotized by the numerous lights of the city below. The next morning, I arose and quickly headed out on the streets. With camera in hand, I strolled all about town, snapping photographs and enjoying the exotic sights I found everywhere I looked. Georgetown was the only large city on Penang, and it numbered about 200,000 inhabitants, mostly of Chinese descent. Elsewhere on the island, there were numerous small towns and fishing villages inhabited by both the Chinese and the ethnic Malaysians. Not far from my hotel, I came across some large joss sticks that were burning in the middle of the road. In their midst, I discovered the nearly extinguished remnant of a joss stick dragon. Only a portion of the dragon's head remained. As I progressed through town, I encountered numerous other smoldering joss sticks, so many that the city grew increasingly hazy with the sweet smoke. And here and there along the sidewalk, I came upon offerings of food and beverage which had been left unattended. After about an hour-long meandering trek along the sidewalks of the city, I heard the sound of a woman singing opera. I followed the music and soon came upon a stage erected on the side of the road. Several women were on the stage operating little puppets. The puppets were enacting a Chinese opera to the sound of recorded music. There was absolutely no one watching the performance. I felt sorry for the performers and therefore decided to take in the performance. I moved to the front of the stage and stood just below it taking photographs of the performers. After I had taken a few pictures, I realized that the women were looking at me in a most bewildered way. I decided that photography was probably forbidden, so I put my camera away. I stood there for another 20 minutes or so, watching the puppets go through their routine. Not another soul joined me for the duration of the show. At least, that is what I thought at the time. As the opera continued, the women's bewildered expressions gradually gave way to more subtle looks of uneasiness. For the life of me, I couldn't imagine why. When the performance ended, I departed and continued my walking tour of the city. As the day wore on, I walked the city until my feet hurt. After that, I hailed a pedicab and languidly pursued more distant attractions until the night appeared. Joss sticks were alight everywhere, and the piles of food and beverage continued to mount up on the sidewalks. While I saw several other opera stages at a distance that day, I chose not to attend another performance. One had been enough for me. Later that evening, while sitting in my hotel's bar, I struck up a conversation with a British expatriate. In the course of our discussion, the subject of the burning joss sticks arose, and soon I learned the details of the Hungry Ghost Festival. The Brit told me about how the joss sticks were burned to honor the souls of the dead, and that the offerings of food and beverage were meant for the ghosts as well. Already suspecting the answer, I asked about the opera. Yes, the Brit said, the opera is intended for the entertainment of the ghost. If you attend a performance, he continued, be sure to stand in the back and never, ever near the front of the stage. As my heart sank into the pit of my stomach, I asked why one should never stand near the stage. By now I knew the answer, but I asked anyway. The Brit replied that the front of the stage was reserved for the hungry ghost. He said that it would be considered offensive to the ghost if one were to stand in such a way as to block their view. For the remainder of my time on Penang, I waited for the offended ghost to call. Although I moved all about the island and even went to the beach on the Andaman Sea a time or two, no misfortune befell me. Perhaps those hungry ghosts realized I was just an American tourist who didn't know better than to block their view. Or maybe it was a slow day at the opera when I was there, and no ghost had bothered to attend. Either way, I now understand the look of bewilderment that I saw on the faces of the women who were sitting there upon that stage. For all they knew, I was blocking the view of a multitude of their dead ancestors. All these years later, I still find myself wondering if the ghost took it out on those bewildered women. If you are ever on Penang Island during the 7th lunar month of the Chinese year, be careful where you stand.